The views expressed in this episode are those of the participants and do not reflect the official policy or position of the United States government. Welcome back to the Fighter Pilot Podcast. Today we've got an episode that I think you're going to love. I'm joined by Louis Skupien. Did I say that right, Louis?
Let's go, Louis. It's the French way, but everyone gets it wrong the first time, so I'm used to it.
Oh, oui. All right. I'm joined by Louis Skupien, host of the Talk 4 podcast, a man who has built one of the most engaging communities around aviation, adventure, and the kind of conversation that make you think differently about the world. Louis is also a guy who doesn't just talk about pushing limits. He straps a jet engine to his back and does it. We're going to get into all of that, plus a brand new documentary he's been working on that I cannot wait to hear about. So turn in, fights on. Louis, welcome to the Fighter Pilot Podcast. Great to have you here.
Cinco, oh my God, man. Thank you so much for having me. This is a big honor and great to be on this side of the mic for once as well. I know I had you on the show before as well when you were in a slightly different job and part of your life, but it's an honor to speak to you again and great to have these kinds of conversations. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, Louis, of course. No, it's great seeing you again. I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I feel like you need a call sign. Do you have a call sign yet? Because I do have some ideas that I want to throw out there, but I'll let you tell me if you have a call sign yet.
Oh, man, you know what? I'm still seeking a good call sign, but if I did have a call sign, there was talk about Icarus once, because the first time I flew with Wiz Buckley, I got really badly sunburned, actually, as a true Brit in classic fashion before my first flight. And you can't see it in the video I made of it, but I was bright red and spent the whole night before the flight sat in front of the aircon unit trying to find anything that could take the redness down. So Wiz cleverly came up with Icarus because in true British fashion, flew way too close to the sun before my first flight. So it's a good contender, but I'm open to hearing more for sure.
Okay, well, we'll have to think through a few options here. So for our listeners out there that don't know you, that are unfamiliar with your podcast or other aviation work, please tell listeners a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sounds good. So again, name's Louis Skupien. I'm 24 years old. I run a podcast called Talk 4. I host some of the highest performance people from around the world in different industries. I'm kind of honed in on the military and the fighter pilot community. I find we get very good conversations from people in that industry, but that's not just that industry. We talk about entrepreneurs, authors, ultra athletes, Olympians, all sorts of stuff from around the world. I'm in aviation as well, so I produce a documentary series called Full Throttle. Recently had the incredible opportunity to fly an F-16 Viper, flown other things as well, so L-39s, Blackhawks, Chinooks, all sorts of really, really cool platforms. And I also have a kind of an entrepreneurial background, so I run a gym, own a gym called Synergy back here in the UK, do personal training, and I'm a former professional tennis player as well. So yeah, my life's kind of split up. I spin a lot of plates, that's for sure, but they're all spinning and I'm having a great time doing it, that's for sure. It's an exciting life and I'm glad to be here.
Louis, that's great, man. High performer. Love it. I love your energy. I love what you're bringing to your audience. And I'm curious, how did that start? Like, where did that begin? Why did you want to be able to share these type of stories?
Yeah, interesting question. So life's been a bit of, 24 years old. So I guess a lot of people think I'm quite young still, which I guess I am in some ways, but I've had a bit of a career shift. So kind of alluded to it there. I was a tennis player, picked up the racket at 4 years old and went on after taking kind of half days at school to pursue the tennis. Became national champion here in the UK, played for England, won for England, played at Wimbledon, did really well, went full time, got on the world circuit, got to the top 500 and was fully sponsored, doing fantastically. And then kind of COVID happens, I guess, really. And then I'm in a bit of a turmoil. So lose my sponsorship, got injured, had a lot of stuff going on in life, just really struggling, lost all my progress and had to give up the tennis career at 18 years old when I was going into my last year of junior tennis, with sights set in Wimbledon again and really taking it to the next level. So, and that was a massive identity crisis, really. I didn't know what I was doing, who I was, or what was next for me at that stage. And then kind of the short version is I ended up sort of picking my act up and started my own business and then realized I was building this business, which was doing really well after its first year, and realized I was building it for the business, but I wanted to have my own voice as well. I felt like all my years in professional tennis and around high performance people and coaches and athletes, I wanted to have my own voice in some shape or form, and had this idea to start a podcast, building from the ground up, anything like a podcast where it's based on people in high performance, trying to get them onto the show. Traditionally podcasts are hours long, and why would anyone come on my show for hours when there's nothing really of value to them at this stage? It's just starting, right? So right at the very beginning, started it with a concept of 4 questions over around sort of like 10 minutes. So really manageable timeframes for people from different industries, and got a lucky first guest and used his name to pitch the next few, and then sent out, hundreds of DMs and emails, every day, just trying to get anyone on the show. And, from all the hundreds I sent out, I got a few yeses. And then as that begins to snowball and the views start to tick up and you get more of a subscriber count and you get better guests on, and the people you're pitching know people who've been on the show before as well, it gets easier. It definitely gets easier. So kept developing that, kept building there. And then I guess the whole aviation thing started really when I watched Top Gun Maverick in the cinemas when that came out, and then things sort of took an interesting turn from there. So yeah, I can expand on that if you like, or go any direction you want from there really. But it's been a weird one, that's for sure. 24 years, and yeah, life's been through a lot of stuff, that's for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I remember that you were a professional tennis player. And I do think it's really important for our listeners out there, because we talk about this, man, life is not going to unfold the way that we expect. But, we got to keep our head up, and we need to understand and appreciate that there is something else out there for us. We need to keep moving. We need to help those around us keep moving. And like your first guest helped you in a sense, like you were an unknown, and they show up on your show, and that's great, right? We need to be there for one another. And I just think it's a great arc so far on your journey. Hopefully it's informative for you as you continue on and meet your own challenges, to come. But regardless, really excited that you've made that shift, because you're making such an impact now with the voice that you carry into these different domains.
Yeah, I'm trying to. I think that's one of the things I've taken from, and I think everything in life, especially times where things go wrong, or you have to have a career shift, or things just don't go according to plan, right? You have to take the lessons learned and you have to go and move forward from there, and then find new paths and start fresh. And I know that with everything I'm doing now, so much of it is highly fundamental to everything, and some of the success I'm seeing nowadays too. Like, what have I learned from tennis? The biggest thing I think that's contributed really is just that professionalism. Day in, day out in the tennis field, you have to be professional in all aspects. Like, if you want to have a sponsor, they have to align with what you're doing. So you have to have a professional image always. You have to be well spoken. You have to be able to communicate with your team. You have to be able to be a team player. You have to be dedicated day in, day out to the routines, to putting in that extra. And I know your book speaks a lot about this as well, but just that extra few percent at the very end, doing a little bit more than the other ones, or finding and unlocking that bit extra. Because in anything in life, skill related, I've found it's quite easy to get into the top sort of, like you say, 80% of people, but then getting through the muck, really, that is that last 20% to get and break into, the high leagues of things and the high performance factor. It's a lot more difficult. And that's the same thing I've found here, just in, aviation documentary creation and building a following and making a podcast. There's a lot of podcasts out there, right? There's not so many people that make the kind of videos I do. Like, I know Sam obviously does that kind of thing, but just trying to find a voice nowadays where there's so much noise out there on social media and these kinds of industries, you have to work a little bit harder than everyone else, and you have to be a little bit smarter with it too. So tennis taught me a lot about how to manage that, how to manage yourself, and not only be 1%, some of the time, but learn how to be in that 1% as much of the time as you can be. It's not just a race of effort, it's a race of endurance too, making it in these kinds of fields, I think.
Right. And it's not just about crushing yourself in attaining it. I talk about a lot too. You need to have that balanced approach, but it all takes work and effort and grit and resilience. And so let's talk aviation stuff. So you're watching Top Gun. You think it's awesome. I'm guessing the original Top Gun, but you are young enough. So maybe like Maverick, Top Gun 2 really inspired you. But, where was that, like that spark, the movie, but it turned into something more, right? Like it wasn't just a movie. Now you're like big into aviation. Like, where was that?
Yeah, so it actually goes a bit further back than Top Gun. So, I mean, that was kind of the reignition of it all, really. But when I was young, and I mean, really, really young, my granddad, in his career, he was a police officer. And I know for a fact from speaking to him that he always wanted to be a fighter pilot. It was one of his regrets, I'd say. He always wanted to fly Spitfires. So, kind of in his older years, he had this Spitfire simulator in his office up in Hampshire. And whenever I went over there, and we'd play on this Spitfire simulator of his, and we just had so much fun with it. I mean, I was very young, but I definitely remember that. And you don't remember too much from when you're like a really young kid, but I remember a lot about those memories. And he had all the models in his office as well, so there was clearly that sort of family passion for it there, I think, especially with him. And I was just so engaged with it. But then life, school, tennis, whatever it was, just sort of lost any touch really with that passion. But had all the models and the die-cast models, and they all got put away in a box and built up dust over, probably a decade or something from when I was young. And then, well, like I said, I watched Top Gun Maverick in the cinemas, and just my socks got blown off by that movie. It stunned me. But more important than just being really amazed by a great movie, I was just absolutely enthralled by these jets, and I wanted to know more about what they were. Like, I didn't know what an F-18 was, didn't know what, the Su-57 was in the movie, or I didn't even know the F-14. I didn't even know here's a funny one. I didn't even know an F-16 existed. I didn't know what the 16 would have been or the difference between them. But, in hindsight, I mean, you could show me a 1 pixel from a photo of any of these jets now. I'd be like, yep, I know exactly what that is. So I watched Top Gun Maverick in the cinema. And at this point, I was around 45 episodes into my podcast. So building traction. And I left there thinking, I have got to speak to a fighter pilot on this podcast. And I didn't even know Top Gun was real. I thought it was just Hollywood. I didn't know there was an actual naval fighter weapons school. I thought it was just something they created. So it turns out, reached out to some fighter pilots and came across a guy called Matthew Buckley, call sign Wiz. And we had a kind of a celebration episode, I guess you could say, for episode 50 of the podcast. And man, at the end of the show, after having a great conversation, the guy just turned around out the blue and said, dude, you got to come to Miami one day. You got to jump in the backseat of my fighter jet and we'll go out. We'll pull some G's, get in the backseat of my L-39 and we'll go pull 7 G's and fly around the Everglades. And man, I just, in terms of once in a lifetime lucky opportunities, I think that takes the cake. So I bit the man's arm off for that opportunity and booked my flights to America. I didn't have much money then, and all the tennis stuff was kind of wrapped up, and you didn't have much else going on really in life. So I thought, what the hell? I'm not going to pass this one up. So took the chance, went out there to Miami and met Wiz at the hangar. And then I guess the rest is history. And somehow that's gone from an L-39 in the Everglades to all sorts. And recently the F-16. So hell of a journey.
Yeah, very exciting. I love how the media and those experiences from your grandfather, your family kind of inspired you in a way to kind of get engaged with this world. And it's a very exciting world. And I think there's actually much more to come. The next few decades are going to be super thrilling with regard to commercial aviation and hypersonics and autonomy. Very good to have you on this journey and you being a champion of what aviation can mean for society. So before we jump into all of the aviation stuff that you're doing in the documentary, I also want to bring up, like, you got into jet suits. So you flew around the Gravity jet suit. I'm, familiar with that company, friends with the company, and support them in some ways. But how do you think of that experience? Like, what was that like?
Oh, super cool. So how did I get to there? So started out flying that jet with Wiz, and it started out flying with the most basic camera gear you could imagine. So like mobile phone, sort of vlog style, and like really old GoPros, poor quality things, just trying to make like a video more for the memories than anything. And then these projects started to embark on, involving like the Red Bull helicopter, and then the Red Devils parachute display team, and then Warbirds like the T6, all sorts of different things that we did projects on, just kept getting better and better each time, right? And upgrading the camera gear. And then funnily enough, came across Richard. I think that was off the back of our podcast, Cinco, a couple of years back now. I think he actually mentioned them and made that connection with Richard. And then we went and got into talks about maybe making like a documentary. And then at this time, all the stuff happening over at the gym here started to kick off for me with, buying the gym, and met this camera guy called Jordan as well. And, he's like next level cinematography. and I brought him onto the team. So then the timelines really sort of lined up then. And it was the first time we've actually made like this commercial grade, amazing documentary that was better than just like a one-man band, which is what I'd been doing before then. And we had this incredible opportunity to fly the Gravity jet suits in Frome at the headquarters there. And I know, Cinco, you've flown this as well. You've had a try on it as well. So I'd love to get your take on it as well. Obviously, it's, you know, former test pilot and stuff. But my God, I mean, the first time your feet leave the ground and they don't come back down, that was a core life memory for me, I'd say. And the whole day was amazing. I had 5 runs in the jet suit, ended up with a 14-second sustained hover by the back end of it. Struggled a little bit for some of it, and that's cool to see in the video. I mean, you know, the runs in the suits are fairly short, but I mean, it was a nice progression arc of seeing, you know, just very basic movements going from that to then actually learning how to sort of control the suit and actually sustain hovers with it. But I mean, quite literally is what it is, you know, 3 miniature turbine jet engines on your back, 2 on each arm, and you're managing all of that power and sustaining hovers and movements on what's literally like a tripod of stability. And we made this whole documentary about it and videoed it. And it was the first time we stepped into really what felt like the next level of these videos. And then since then, it's just kept getting better and better, I feel.
Oh, that's fantastic. No, you know, flying the jet suit's really a wonderful experience. It's very unique. You know, when you fly in a glider, have you been in gliders yet?
I haven't been in the glider yet. No. It's on the bucket list for sure.
Yeah, gliders are a lot of fun. Very different experience. Really, really enjoy gliders. And you feel like you're, in a way, you're like one with Bernoulli. You don't have thrust, and you're just sitting there using thermals, and you're cutting through the air. And the jet suit is like you're one with Newtonian physics, right? Like you're putting engines on your arms, and you're feeling their rotation, and now it's stable. It's completely safe and stable, but it's an interesting experience, and almost kind of like the juxtaposition between those two is pretty academic. Like it's really neat to do the glider thing, and it's really neat to do this jet suit thing where you feel the engines and what that thrust is like, and also the remarkable human mind and ability to augment that type of movement, and you become the actuator of like stability, and you just pick it up. It's like riding a bike, you know, and those type of things have been really fun to see people kind of experience. So yeah, so glad you were able to get connected with them, and so glad you're able to do, you know, the documentary you did. And let's talk about more documentary stuff, man. I saw the trailer for your new documentary coming out, and it looked awesome. So tell us about that experience.
Oh, dude, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. So it's super exciting. So running back really to the first time I flew with Wiz, I remember, it's not in the video because I didn't know how to record intercom audio at that point, but I remember asking him, hey man, what's this like in the L-39 versus like, you know, what he flew, F-18s, you know, in Red School of Top Gun. And he was like, dude, it's like, you know, driving a Toyota versus a Bugatti. It's sun and moon difference. And I think since then, I mean, I knew how cool the L-39 was, and that was a life-changing experience. But I always had that little sentence in my head thinking, oh man, I got to try the high end of this stuff one day. And turns out when you actually look into it, it's pretty damn difficult, right? I know that, Cinco, you had a bit of experience, you know, with I can't remember the YouTube channel's name, but I know that you.
Hacksmith.
That's it. Yeah,
Jim Hoffman. Yeah, awesome. Hacksmith. Yeah.
Yeah, I know that he had an F-16 ride, but I mean, typically, I mean, you can probably speak in this a bit as well, but it's typically like a media ride or an incentive ride. Usually that's sort of the hometown hero stuff, right? It's not so much foreign nationals, or if you are foreign nationals, typically more actors or like A-list celebrity style stuff, right?
Yeah, no, it is. We usually try to give first and foremost maintainers, and then people on base, and then you go into the community, like community leaders. Like there's kind of incentive, and then you start reaching out to, okay, yes, you could bring in some famous or celebrity type people that may be able to share the message. It's important for our society to understand these taxpayer money going to security, national defense. These systems are owned by the taxpayer. And so getting the word out and making people familiar with this technology capability is important. And so then you bring in, yeah, like some influencers or people that have a platform that they can share the excitement of it, because there is some really cool, exciting things with the technology. It's awesome for people to be able to experience. And, you know, someone like you sharing the story, they're able to experience it, maybe not firsthand, but, you know, through your storytelling.
Damn right. So yeah, I mean, the way this one worked out was, I think I always knew it was going to be a pretty difficult pitch. And if there's one thing I've learned is that, going from working with civilian teams and jet display teams like the Patriots and the Baltic Bees and stuff who have kind of slightly different goals, the military had their own sets of things that they were looking to highlight, right? And I mean, I imagine they get pretty regularly, pitched on ideas to do documentaries, but the amount that actually go through, I have no idea what the percentage is there, but I imagine it's pretty low. So I worked out that about a year and 2 months ago now in May, I did a podcast with Brigadier General Douglas Wickett, call sign Beaker. So I'm commander of the 412th Test Wing at Edwards at the time. And we just had this fantastic conversation. It ended up being the best performing episode on my podcast. And I don't know how to explain it other than that, I went in there feeling kind of intimidated, like this is a pretty big deal podcast, very prolific person in the space. And just instantly felt like I'd made a friend. We had this fantastic conversation about all things aerospace testing universe, Edwards, F-16, F-47, B-21, T-7. Like we spoke about everything. And it honestly came across and felt like a conversation between just two people who were genuinely just ultra interested in the same thing. And we had this great chat. And at the end of the episode, after we got off air, I had a word with him and said, hey, sir, I would be so honored to have the opportunity in some shape or form to tell the story of Edwards and the Combined Test Force and the 412 and really what this is all about. Because I feel like when people make documentaries about jets and the military, it all seems to focus in on, the cool side of things, right? Which, to most people looks like, the afterburner and the jets and the missiles and the guns and all these sorts of things and the flying and the pilots. But there's a story that's not being told here. And that's in the people who do the testing and the developing, the people behind the scenes, the maintainers, all sorts of stuff. And I think after this conversation, I put it to him in such a good way that I think he was pretty much sold on the idea of it at that point, but we had a lot of work to do to make anything happen out of it. So I know that he went down to the public affairs office after the podcast and spoke to the team there. And I don't know exactly what he said, but I know that he told them to make it happen. So that was May last year. And then it took us all the way from May to January to actually get out to Edwards, because obviously there was a government shutdown and then there were things happening at Edwards and all sorts of things going on that just caused delays. And then the prospect of actually an F-16 ride to showcase AUTO-GCAS as part of the documentary came into the conversation. And then it was a case of there's a lot of stuff we have to work through here, right? So, all the background checks, then all of the medical history, then getting it signed off by, the ops group, by whoever, in the windowless room in the Pentagon or the DOD or DOW had to sign that off. No idea how many people involved in it, but I'm sure countless people involved in making an opportunity in a test F-16D at Edwards for a civilian foreign national. I can only imagine how much work that really took to make that happen with the paperwork. So it took us all the way to January to get out to Edwards, and then it gets really exciting from there. So how many people do you reckon, Cinco? I know you were doing some work over at the Pentagon not too long ago. So how many people do you reckon had a word in that flight?
Yeah, it depends. I mean, it's a long process, as you can see, but it definitely has to go up to people at the Pentagon and they need to sign off. And yeah, you're looking at probably a dozen plus signatures that are needed on some forms. Beaker's an amazing human, fantastic fighter pilot, test pilot, was an instructor out of the Air Force Academy actually too. So I know he's moved on from the 412 test wing, but yeah, he was a great human. Also, for our listener out there, you said Auto-GCAS, Automatic Ground Collision Avoidance System. Just get that acronym out of the way. That's where the plane takes control away from the pilot at the last possible second, saves them from a ground collision. All that system was developed and tested out at Edwards Air Force Base in the F-16, and it's also in the F-35. And there's a system in the F-22 that is automatic collision avoidance. So,
great catch, Cinco. I want to add as well that while hunting for some B-roll for DVIDs, I actually came across your video when AUTO-GCAS was coming into fruition as well. So I know that you've got ties to that too. So super important mission set there. And really, I think the big one there is that it highlights Edwards that the place isn't just about developing the next aircraft, the next, capability for the warfighter in terms of weapons. It's also about, protecting the warfighter too and saving lives, which is really what we wanted to tell the story of. So, I think we highlight this in the video, but you talk about, military bases and people automatically sort of go to, right, guns, weapons, bombs, bombers, fighter jets, etc. But actually really interesting to show that perspective. Actually, it's not all about that. It is also about testing and developing things to keep people safe and save lives as well, which it has done many, many lives so far, AGCAS.
Yeah, that technology, so many like it too that are in our platforms and our systems, because it's not just like you just mentioned, not just the aircraft or the weapon. There's other systems that have to interact with the different domains. And I think that ultimately Edwards has this amazing, remarkable history of kind of the cradle of aviation. Not fully. I mean, right, the Wright brothers weren't out there testing, but early on, we went out there to that dry lake bed that you can see from space, that is harder than concrete, that's non-porous, which is really cool when it rains. It actually just looks like this humongous lake that's like 1 inch deep. But, space shuttles land on it, other aircraft land on it. I've landed on it, 30,000-foot runway, if you want to think of it like that. And the people out there are just so dedicated to trying to ensure that our warfighter and our systems are going to deliver the way that they're supposed to, that they're safe, that they meet contractual specifications, that we're developing technology that is going to meet our adversary. And it's very serious work, right? I can't really continue on without acknowledging just the tragedy that happened recently too at Edwards. We lost 8 test professionals in that B-52 that went down, and it's devastating. It's tragic. It is very serious work. Fortunately, we don't lose people that often because of the disciplined approach that we have regarding tests, but it's still a risk that we're always trying to mitigate, but we can't always mitigate. And yeah, I want to acknowledge those amazing people. I was friends with the pilot, and it's just really hard to see that. And how do we respond to that tragedy? And it kind of goes back to this idea of, I think we need to understand that people have sacrificed for our freedoms. People have sacrificed for what we often take for granted, and we need to earn that sacrifice, right? We need to be serving in some capacity, serving our family, our local community. We can't take our freedoms for granted, because there are so many that have given their entire lives and their life in service for us to make a better future. And I just think it's so important for us to realize the sacrifices that are made. And Edwards represents that to me.
Edwards is a big one, especially for that kind of thing. And I think some of the time I spent out there as well, sort of realized as well in the conversations I had that the mission out there, test as a whole, the whole concept behind test really is pushing things and seeing how far they can go. And the whole idea about it really is that they find the limits so the people, the warfighter, don't have to in combat. So they're the ones who stick their neck out initially first by pushing an aircraft as fast as it's ever gone, or as high as it's ever gone, or, first test or software development and all these different areas. And they do all that at, places like Edwards, or, Edwards predominantly in the Air Force at least. And they do that so that the people, when they get to combat, don't have to find those limits for themselves. And that is a hell of a mission, but often overlooked. And that is one of the things we really wanted to showcase in, the production that we're making, just that mission behind that and why that happens and why it's so important. It's vital.
Yeah. Who is this documentary for? Do you think basically all ages, kind of revealing the topics we've been discussing?
I think so. I mean, the idea really behind it, I think, is we wanted to showcase a little bit of everything, right, for a bit of everyone. So, kind of standard documentary style. We start off really with the history piece. Why is Edwards based on a lake bed? What's happened there over the course of history? And we had this great conversation with JT from Edwards, actually, right in front of the SR-71 at the Air Force Heritage Museum. And it was a great conversation. And he's an incredibly knowledgeable guy, but he depicts really just what's happened over the course of history in Edwards. But nowadays, movies, social media, content, it all tends to get a little bit more condensed and shorter form, just because people's attention span gets a bit smaller. So we have like the long form conversations too on the podcast, but then the documentary really highlights, just a brief really on the Edwards history. And then we get into what goes on nowadays over there. So We went into the heritage room of the 416 flight test squadron and spoke to Hash, who was my pilot. And we spoke about really what the 416 flight test squadron's there to do. So the kind of missions they run, why they do it, who they're serving, the platforms they're working with nowadays, a little bit of the history there as well. So really what's going on in the present and then what's coming up in the future too. And then we spoke to a flight test engineer, a guy called Eric, civilian as well, which really highlights, the importance of the combined test force and then, how they serve in their own way at Edwards and, how they worked on AGCAS. And then that's where AGCAS comes in. So, that whole story, that storyline arc of how Edwards is not just about, developing the next new things. It's also about saving lives and doing the important work there to make the platforms more suitable for pilots, which I think, Cinco, you may know the exact number, but I think it's somewhere between 12 and 18 pilots saved now from AGCAS, something like that, right?
Yeah, we're at 13. Yep.
Yeah, something like that. 13. So, and then after that, it's kind of like the media pull, I guess. We did the flight in the Viper and we showcased really what it's like for someone who's unfamiliar really with that sort of a setting to go through a 2 or 3 day sort of get ready to fly F-16 at Edwards. So, that was the stuff you can expect, the medical flight doc appointments, then it was local survival training, parachute, then it was egress, then it was suit fitting, oxygen mask, all the fun stuff. And we really showcase that process in kind of like a 2 or 3 day format in the documentary over a few minutes. And then it's kind of like, right, we're in the pre-brief room now, speaking to Hash, and he's talking about the flight profile that we're about to do. And then, that's the kind of really fun part of it. But we made sure to tie in really the most important missions of Edwards way before we get to the fun stuff. So I think, people can, see that progression really from just talking about the history and the important mission that's done at Edwards and then, round off with really the fun side of it too. So it starts off kind of with the homework side of it, I guess you could say, and then ends off with, the bang.
Well, I think that people are very fascinated by those other things as well, like egress training and doing the medical and going through parachute survival, all aspects of it that are pretty interesting in their own right. But let's get to the flight, man. Okay, so Hash was your pilot. You guys are flying F-16D. Do you know what block it was?
72, if I remember correctly.
All right. And what was it like? Like, what was the profile? What did you guys do?
Right. Well, I'll kind of give you the short version of it. So we took off out of Edwards and did an unrestricted climb. Hash gave me control of the aircraft after we got to, I think, several thousand feet. And then I got to, have a go, really. Got to try the F-16. We headed towards the Sidewinder low level. So then we had a bunch of the local spotters who hang out in Haystack and take all those incredible photos that tend to always go viral on social media. They were helping us to, film and showcase some photos of that flight. So we got down into Sidewinder and we did point A to, I think it was point Delta. And then we got out of Sidewinder, did the fly past of Haystack Mountain and got some incredible photos. And the low level was just amazing. Really, really cool. Then we got up to 50,000 feet. So, the high end of things. So we went low, fast in the Sidewinder, then got up to, 50,000 high. Broke the sound barrier, got to Mach 1.58, broke the sound barrier a second time. Hash gave him the controls back before we did that. So I've kind of got my claim to 5 minutes of fame there to say I flew the F-16 myself through the sound barrier on the second run and then got back down to the lake bed. We then did the demo of AGCAS several times. So kind of like put it into a simulated dive and then showcased how the F-16 sort of saves lives if a pilot was to go into to get confused, make a mistake, or, G-lock. And then we went and pulled 9Gs and then got back to the lake bed after that. We stayed clear of a U-2 that was in the area at the same time as well, which is pretty cool. And then we buzzed the control tower at Edwards and then came in for recovery and had the best sunset ever as we took the canopy up again. So, I mean, I don't think it gets much better than that, but yeah, it's pretty cool.
Well, so you did the tower flyby.
Yep.
Okay, so the tower flyby, for those who don't know, there's a tower. It's not the control tower that manages the airspace right around the airfield and tells people they're clear to land and all that. It's a tower that's much shorter. It's on the lake bed. It's in alignment with the runway. And so you fly by at 100 feet past this tower. And the intent is actually you're doing pitot static testing because you're able to do some measurements, knowing exactly where the plane is flying over. There's a line that's marked, this big, dark black line that's marked on the lake bed. That is a tower flyby line. You fly on the line. And so the tower that you're flying by knows how far you are from them. And they're able to monitor certain aspects of the aircraft and measure, because you also know the airspeed that you're flying. And so you're doing testing to do this tower flyby. But what it ultimately turns into is just this awesome experience to fly at 100 feet, going 600 plus miles an hour right past this tower off the end of a runway at Edwards. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was super cool. And I think we had actually asked to do that because we had an evening flight. And I mean, let's put it this way. I mean, I thought this is my, my golden ticket to a once in a lifetime flight. I got to ask for everything. So I said, like, Hash, get us as high as you can go, get us as fast as you can go. Can we hit 1,000 miles an hour? Yep, we certainly did that. Hit over 1,000. So 1,000 miles an hour is about Mach 1.5. So we made that goal. Then obviously did the tower flyby, and we asked if we could just save just a little bit of fuel left for one last push of the afterburner right before we got back to Edwards. And because we knew by the time we got back to Edwards, it was going to be getting dark, or just about getting dark at that time. The sun was going down. So we knew that the afterburner, you'd be able to see that really well on the video. So, bless them. The multimedia team at Edwards did such a great job at helping us film this project as well, and really helped me out. They were there and they filmed us as we did this final flyby. And then you get that nice long afterburner behind the F-16 as we're going past. And it just creates this incredible footage. And then obviously came around, and I don't know how to explain it other than that it just felt like there were other powers in play. I mean, when we took off, it was pretty cloudy. It was a great day to fly, but I mean, there was loads of clouds. It was kind of dull in some ways. And when we got back, you can see it in the footage as well, just the heavens opened, man. And we had this golden sunset that just created the most beautiful, picturesque landing. And even when the canopy came up, because I had one of my GoPros attached to the canopy, you get this nice slow shot of the canopy coming up over these golden wings of the Viper with that sunset behind us at Edwards. And it was like the perfect ending. I mean, it all happened in that order. We did the filming, all the activities at Edwards, test pilot school, walking the halls there, meeting loads of people, filming interviews, then all the training. And then the very last thing I had at Edwards was the flight and that landing. So it was the most perfect ending to 3 days of just whirlwind of all of this stuff. But I mean, I'll never forget it. It was the best experience of my life for sure. The whole thing was incredible.
Wow. I mean, you're bringing back memories too of just, I love flying out there and the sunsets. Man, Edwards is out in the middle of kind of nowhere. It's hot. It's windy. The sunsets are unbeatable. There's something about it that is just always wonderful. It was very centering, reflective, awe-inspiring. I just loved when the sun would go down over the mountains, how it looked over the lake bed. Yeah, loved the sunsets at Edwards.
Californian sunset, right? I mean, it just doesn't get much better than that. And we chose January. Partly it worked out because of just some of the stuff that was happening in the world at the time, right? But January was great because we didn't have that heat haze too. So Edwards wasn't unbearable. It was actually kind of like a nice temperature, but really cold in the mornings. But, when we landed, just, it was just like that elation, because you never know. I mean, that's sort of the thing about these projects that I do. And you never quite know. I mean, aerospace is just one of those ones where, you travel a very long way to do these kinds of things, and you never know until you're really there. Like, even you could be in the cockpit and something could happen, and then it could all get scrapped, or operational needs could take precedence, or someone could have an issue with it, or maybe there was something in your medical history or whatever. There's just so many variables in it, so you never know until it's happened. So I mean, really, what was probably all the way from June all the way to January when we landed, it was just months of just not stress. It was excitement, but there's obviously stress in there as well because it's a big project and a lot riding on it. And then it all worked out just fine. I mean, honestly, you couldn't have made it up. And found a couple of coins on the side of the runway as well, I think dating back to 1940 something, and I had them in my flight suit, so I gave them to mum back home as well. And it's a supersonic ancient Edwards coin as well, so the whole thing was just wrapped up perfectly.
Oh, I love it all. What surprised you most? Was there like a part of the flying that kind of took you off guard?
Yeah, it's a really, really good question. I think the low level was one of the ones that really surprised me the most. I mean, how aggressive that actually was and how fast it actually looks when you're actually down there. And, to try and imagine how fast that was when we're up high, flying 1,000 miles an hour, then, we were down low and obviously you can't cross the sound barrier there. But, it's kind of, for me, trying to imagine the speed we were going when we're at the high end of things in the supersonic corridor, if we were going that fast down on the Sidewinder, how that would look would have just been ridiculous. A few things you didn't expect, like, silly little things. When you go that fast, you don't expect, like the jet to rumble or have that little bit of a shake to it and stuff too. Like that's maybe a little bit unsettling. 50,000 feet, the oxygen, you don't necessarily notice that so much going down. The breathing's a little bit harder, but you just sort of adapt to it. How hard 9Gs is as well. I've seen so many videos of people passing out and people getting sick as well. And honestly, felt really good the whole flight. I felt worse flying in turboprops before than F-16. Actually, it was a pretty smooth ride. Obviously, 9G is pretty intense, but for the most part, the whole flight was just an absolute dream. I think one of the most surprising bits for me, actually, now I think about it, was actually taking controls of it. Just, you hear the stories about the F-16 joystick, right? Just how small the movement is there and the pressure, rather than like traditional joystick where you have to really move it to get, fly-by-wire reaction. But F-16 was just amazing. It truly actually felt like you think what you want the jet to do, and just that little bit of hand pressure just makes it react to it. And then that full roll rate performance of the Viper literally feels like it's just at the edge of thought rather than the edge of like, moving a joystick. I mean, it's truly, you spoke about, that augment in the gravity jet suit and how you sort of adapt to that. I actually felt the same thing in the Viper in some ways too, where, after a little bit of flying time and controlling it via the stick, it just sort of integrates with you and you feel like you're not having to fly it. You're just sort of at the pointy end of, the F-16 dart, and it's doing whatever you think you want it to do. And it's almost like it thought of it before you did. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the F-15. It's very special to me, and I flew it, from pretty young age. But man, the F-16 is awesome. It is really fun to fly. I have about 50 hours flying that jet, and I have 1 hour in an F-16C. I was all alone. The others were all, flying with other people. But regardless, you're right. I mean, it cuts through the air. It is a G monster if it's clean. So that's exciting. And for those that don't know, those shots in Maverick, going back to that movie, when they're doing low level, that is how fast the world is going by when you are flying at 100 feet. Now, I would imagine you guys were just down to 500 feet. When we're doing test missions, we'll go down to 100 feet. But the world really does go by very quickly.
Yeah.
You got to be very present in that moment. It teaches you presence like nothing else because you have no room for error.
Yeah. I don't know what I'm allowed to say, really. But I mean, I know that all the radio calls and sort of the Sidewinder special really is 500 feet, 500 knots, right? But without alluding to it too much, I don't know if I'm allowed or not. But, I think we got a little bit lower. Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. I'm sure Hash was completely at 500 feet. I mean, I'm sure he followed all the rules. We usually just go to 500 feet, but he's a test pilot. Test pilots were clear down to 100 feet. So yeah. I'm sure it was fine if he went lower. But that's great, man. Well, very cool. So, you sit at this intersection of aviation now, kind of gotten into this, professional sports, storytelling. Like, what is like a common thread through these arcs that you'd love to share with listeners?
Common thread. So I think I'm trying to figure out still what all this really is, and I mean the common thread really is that I'm ultra interested in high performance in whatever industry that is, and all I do constantly is put one foot in front of the other and just try and make the best of every situation I get myself into. And I wouldn't have ever imagined myself in aerospace or making documentaries, but I mean, I know that I'm doing what I love, and I'm a big purveyor of that too. Unconventional methods from A to Z sometimes work. Like for me, I didn't actually, in terms of like my sort of academic career, I guess you could say or not say, I pulled out of school pretty early to do home education, but I never got kind of traditional exams, didn't go to university, didn't go to college. And I think one of the kind of key lessons I really want to say to people and sort of push to people is that you can do pretty much whatever you want as long as the effort and the intent is there. And, I always thought, oh God, if I don't make it in tennis, what the hell am I going to do with myself? And turns out, you can get yourself into like an F16 if you're smart about it and you play the right cards and you do the right thing. Or, you can buy a business like a gym or own a gym or something, if you play your cards right and really graft away at it and, make the right connections. You can build a podcast. I'm sure people could, race cars or, build their own business or do whatever. And I don't think you need to have, a piece of paper that necessarily says that you can do that. I think actually getting up and going and making massive effort usually gets people at least a lot of the way towards these things. So yeah, high performance for me is the big one, really. I really want to make sure that these projects and these things that I do aren't just about me and flying and looking cool. And, even the military or, even like Edwards, I want to make sure that people go into these things and I want them to feel inspired to go and chase great things if they possibly can and learn the lessons and apply them too. Because, I don't necessarily think that mum and pop back home here in the UK are necessarily going to, have life-changing things necessarily from learning about Edwards and the Combined Test Force other than thinking it was a great watch. But maybe they'll look at that and be inspired by the level of performance and the professionalism that the people there put in day to day in a mission that's much bigger than themselves. And that might inspire them to go and serve their community or, go and help people or have a change of career path or go and maybe see me and see how I've gone and, made something that's truly something born out of passion into something that's actually a relevant business model potentially now and in the future. And maybe they'll see their own passion in a different light and think, hey, maybe if I play my own cards right and really chase, the thing that I like to do and get creative with it and provide enough value, maybe they can go and turn that into their future as well. So yeah, really it's about inspiring a little bit of everyone to go and chase great things. That's really what my common thread is.
Yeah, I love it. It's such an important message. It's in alignment with the things I've talked about on this show. Who are we becoming, right? It can't just be this one thing. I'm just going to be a professional tennis player. I'm just going to be a fighter pilot. I'm just going to, right? It has to be more about like holistically how we're approaching the opportunities and challenges that we face every single day. And, how are you disciplined? How are you prepared? How are you building the community around yourself that is going to allow you to be successful? Because it does take a community. And it just as importantly, you need to be there for the other community members to lift them up, to help them along their journey. And so I love that whole message. All right. So if you could strap on a jet suit or a fighter aircraft, what are you going to pick? Which one?
Oh, wow. Difficult. Very difficult question.
Yeah, a little unfair, maybe.
Oh God, you know what? If I could ever get myself back in an F-16 again, I think I'd have to take that opportunity. But jet suit is easily the coolest thing I've ever done. That's felt like I'm truly doing it. Flying a something sort of feels like you're sort of flying a something, right? But I mean, that was the first time that I actually, you see it in the video, and that was what's nice about it too. My head wasn't all in, let's make a video and let's film this. I had a camera crew who was doing that for me, so I got to experience the whole thing, from my own perspective. And I just remember the first time I landed after, I think it was run 3, after, we put the power up a bit, Paul had increased the power and then told me to take a little hop, and then I didn't come back down. I just, ripped my headset off after we turned the engines off, and I just went, oh my God, I can flipping fly. I remembered to keep a PG as well in the video, but I mean, that was my honest reaction. I couldn't believe it. I just thought, as someone who was a fan of Iron Man when I was younger and always just, almost begging myself to invent something like that in the future. I mean, to have had the opportunity to experience Richard's innovation, which is truly an incredible innovation, was just life altering, to be honest. It's a beautiful machine.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful. And for our listeners out there, if you've done the math, Louis was approximately 6 years old when Iron Man first came out. To make many people that are listening to this feel very old, including myself. No, that's great. Very different experiences. And man, I think next time, maybe we should take you up in an Eagle. Just saying, you got to compare. The Hornet too. Hornet's amazing. If you want to fly slow and really feel like you can whip it around, you got to fly the Hornet or the Eagle. The Viper's not so good at that.
Oh man, I tell you what, whatever I can do, anything like that, I'd be killing for the opportunity. But I got some big stuff in my mind, and unfortunately, it's one of those ones. Grass is, I guess, always green in some ways, but I mean, for me, it's always a case of I'm never quite happy. So. Once upon a time it was L39, then after that it was just anything else, and then it was just the dream was F16, and I got my sights set much higher as well now, and I'm not going to stop until someone literally has to tell me to stop. So we'll see how far we can take it. Eh?
That's great. Well, you need to start jumping into like formation stuff too, fighter aircraft formation. Get you in like the Blue Angels, the Thunderbirds. Well, speaking of future for you, Louis, what's up next? What should people be watching for?
Oh, it's a great question. So tomorrow, well, I don't know when this airs, maybe a couple of days afterwards, but I mean, I guess it'll be out by the time this episode's been listened to. F16 video, the one at Edwards, is going out. It's taken me 6 months to edit it. I did it myself. I wanted to have that level of care that I knew it deserved. So that's going out. Lucky enough to have had some incredible projects since then as well. So shortly following the F16 project, there's a whole big one in the same trip about the UH-60 Black Hawk, which I did at Los Alamitos. Shortly after that, an incredible project that I did in South Carolina with the AH-64 Apache gunship. Got to fly on the ramp several times of the CH-47 Chinook, filming the Apaches, and we had all the fun. We went to Poinsett Range, and they ripped some of my watermelons apart actually with the cannon, fired the hydro rockets, and we did all sorts of cool stuff about the Apache. And then had some time at NJet doing flights in their T6 Texan 2 and exploring the mission there with everything that they get up to out there, which is extremely cool. Obviously training the future fighter pilots of NATO. And after that, that's where sort of my in the can list ends. And after that, sky's the limit, or maybe not. For me, it's what goes higher and what goes faster than anything I've flown before. Hopefully you'll find me there in the near future.
All right, we will look for you in the sky. So for our Patreon subscribers, please check out our bonus material. We're going to talk about Louis flipping in a Red Bull helicopter. And for those that don't know, you can become a Patreon subscriber. Just go to fighterpilotpodcast.com, click on those links, and we'd love to have you for the bonus material. You get early access to our guests to ask questions. You get early access to the show, and you get additional information that is always exciting. So go check that out. Louis, this has been an absolute blast. You're a guy who loves fighter jets, straps jet engines to his back for fun, and makes documentaries. You're living the dream, my friend. I respect every bit of it.
Man, thank you so much. That was epic. What fun.
So, folks, go find Louis on Talk 4 podcast. You will not be disappointed, and please keep an eye out for his documentary series. His videos are fantastic. We'll try to get those links up in the show notes if possible. If today's episode reminded you that the best adventures are the ones you actually go do, please share it with someone who needs that nudge. Cinco out.